Hello, BookTube, and welcome to LitMas Day 3. LitMas is, of course, as you know by now from your subscription feed, this is an event created by the guys at Stripcover Lit, where we all band together for the Christmas spirit to answer a holiday prompt every day until Christmas Day. And we're on Day 3, which is the best book I read this year. Which is easier for some people than others. It's murderously difficult for me. In fact, like so many of the prompts on Litmas, it is virtually impossible for me to answer this question in the literal terms in which it's asked. I read an enormous number of books in 2018, by far the greatest number of books in any year that I have ever read. By far. I hadn't realized until this year how much I was slowed down in my reading by caring for my old dogs in the last couple of years. This year, it's a lot of books. There's a lot of books to go through. I, of course, as some of you will know, I also, forever and ever, I make year-end lists over at Open Letters Review under my literary blog, Steve Reads. I make year-end lists in 10, 11, 15 categories of the best and worst books of every year. And even those lists are hard. Even making 100 books, even narrowing down to that is very hard to do. So narrowing down to one book is pretty difficult. The one natural choice that came to mind, the one that I have thought about the most, the one that had the most in it, was The Carbon Ideologies by William Vollmann. 2 enormous volumes that really do constitute one book, all about what caused, past tense, the extinction of humankind. It's a strange and deeply affecting book. But you know, that might very well get the spot. But there's another book that's also been on my mind, just digging away at me. It's not technically new. It's new in English translation, but it came out in 2017 in French, and it's been nagging at me ever since. It made one of my year-end lists, but even so, I've been thinking about it. And it's this. It's The Order of the Day by Eric Voyade. This is won the Prix Goncourt and has got some press in the English language translation. Has gotten some press. It's a kind of a split narrative between the early 30s and the sort of techno-industrial financial cabal that came together to decide to finance the rise of National Socialism, of Hitler and National Socialism. And also the other half of the split narrative is later in the 30s, the annexation of Austria, the Anschluss, by Germany, Hitler's decision to annex his own home country. And it's a confusing book. First of all, it's the exact opposite on the spectrum from Carbon Ideologies. Carbon Ideologies, one note, one of the endnotes that Vollmann writes is as long as this book. He writes hundreds of endnotes. One of them is as long as this thing. This is shorter than the opening section of the opening book of Carbon Ideologies. So on one hand, it's on the other end of the spectrum, but they're alike in a lot of ways. Beauty of prose, the icicle sharp nature of the insights on every page, so that even I, who I admit I am a precipitously fast reader, even I was stopping often in both cases to just think, okay, let me unpack that, let me unravel what you just wrote. But it was also confusing to me. The reaction that's been getting has been confusing. This has shown up on some year-end lists here in America under Best Fiction. And I understand that because that's usually Prix Goncourt's bailiwick, and also because the author said that he considers this a novel because, in his opinion, there is no such thing as a neutral history. I swear. If somebody would put forward an international movement to gag authors, they're just write in your garret, but you are not allowed to make a public statement of any kind on any platform or media, I would sign that petition. I want to go around to the various critics who have named this one of who've read those sentiments from the book's idiotic author, and named this as a great novel in translation in 2018. I want to go around to those critics and say, if the author had called this an apricot cupcake, would you be putting it in your kitchen? Is that the case? Who cares what the author says it is? This is a work of history. This is not a work of fiction. It's the strangest thing in the world how some people will just take leaders. Anyway, this is nonfiction. This is a work of history. There isn't a single thing in here that can't be documented. I don't know what the author means when he says there's no such thing as a neutral history. I have no idea what that means. Does that mean that when I say that the Nazis invaded France and occupied Paris, I might be wrong? I don't understand. I don't try to get too far into the heads of authors. They're adorable little creatures, aren't they, in their own way? And really, I'm more concerned with the jewels that they give us. And this is one of them. I have been thinking about this book and the amazing, swooping roller coaster ride of reading it since I read it. And I have a request in for the French because I'm only assuming that if the English language translation of this thing can do this to me, then the French will do even more. We shall see. My requests are working. They're working their slow, labyrinthine ways through the bowels of the international publishing industry, where people are just wanting to know, okay, who is this guy? Who is this guy that he wants an English language, a French edition of this book? When it gets to me, I will read it and I will compare the two. But in the meantime, the English was so good. Did I mention who this was translated by? Mark Polizzotti. Mark Polizzotti translated this from the French, and does, as far as I can tell, a magnificent job. But that is my answer to the litmus prompt for the day. The best book that you read in 2018. It's a brutal question for me. I didn't read 30 books. And I didn't read 300 books. And my total was... it was freakish, even by my own standards. Picking one book among those. But for the purposes of Litmas, and because the guys at Strip Cover Lit cannot be gainsaid, I am going to bring it down to two. One huge and one small. The Order of the Day and Carbon Ideology. So those are my answers for Litmus Day 3. I'm not going to look ahead. I sort of made an informal point of not looking at the prompts ahead of time. So I looked at them once. I don't quite remember them. So I'm not looking ahead to tomorrow. We'll see what tomorrow's is. It's got to be easier than this. But in the meantime, that is Litmus Day 3. And I look forward to all of your videos. This is so much fun. And I'll be back with plenty more to talk about. Thank you, BookTube.